Amateur Traveler is in its 20th year now, but can you imagine if I had people on the show who had never been to the destination, but had just read about it or seen a movie about it? That wouldn't make any sense at all, and you wouldn't listen. We all know how important it is to receive advice from people who know a destination to get the most authentic local experience. And a great option for experiencing this is Explore Worldwide and their authentic small group adventures, led by local tour leaders, perfect for solo travelers who want to meet like minded people with a desire for adventure. I'm often an independent traveler, but two of my last three trips were with small group tours because they organize everything and it's a lot easier. If you want to recreate the tour I did to Malta, they have a Malta and Gozo Discovery Tour. I'm intrigued by one of their tours called A Taste of Sicily. The company again is Explore Worldwide, and visit exploreworldwide.com to learn more. And thanks to Explore Worldwide for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler.
I got my bags packed and on a roll. I'm heading out there and I'm ready to go. Looking real good in my passport photo.
Amateur Traveler, episode 615. Today, the Amateur Traveler talks about mysterious ancient statues, fairs and festivals, desert badlands, haciendas, and coffee as we go to the coffee region of Colombia. Welcome to the Amateur Traveler. I'm your host, Chris Christensen. Remember, after you listen to this episode, if you're interested to sign up for the Africa trip, the South Africa trip for Amateur Traveler for 2019. But now, let's talk about Colombia. I'd like to welcome to the show Alejandro, who is coming to us from Bogota, but coming to talk to us about Colombia. Alejandro, welcome to the show.
Hey, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Now, we've talked about Colombia before, but you've got a little different itinerary that you're recommending for us.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping we could talk about some regions that are kind of undiscovered by international tourism,
Okay.
A little outside of the typical Cartagena and Medellin.
Excellent. And why should we go to Colombia?
I think it's a really nice country, and if you're interested in Latin American culture, I think it's one of the best places to go because it's still rather undiscovered by international tourism. You'll get a more authentic experience, I think.
Excellent. And you talked about wanting to talk about a different itinerary. What itinerary are you recommending?
A 2-week itinerary. First, we would go to a region called the Neiva and the Huila department, which is south of Bogota, 4 or 5 hours by land. And then we could talk about the coffee region, which is one of the most popular places for Colombians and one of the things that makes us famous, aside from all the bad stuff.
Excellent. So let's start then in the south and head north.
I think most people would arrive in Bogota since it's the biggest airport and it has the best connections.
Right.
So you could either take another plane, a local flight to Neiva, which is the capital of the Huila department. And from there, you can take either a bus or a tour, depending on what your preferences are, to our first place, which is the Tatacoa Desert.
Okay.
From there, we would go to a small town called San Agustin, which has one of the biggest archaeological complexes of the country. And that's where we would base ourselves for the first week. And then we would go to the coffee region, which is basically 3 small departments, kind of in the middle of the country, like kind of in between Medellin and Bogota.
Okay.
I would recommend to base yourself in the city of Pereira and go to all the nearby attractions from there. So that would be basically the place for the second week.
Okay. So let's start in Neiva. And what are we going to see when we're there?
Okay, well, Neiva is just a small town. It doesn't have a lot of attractions. You could maybe spend one day there if you want to relax after your flight or something like that. But what I would recommend is to head straight to the Tatacoa Desert, which is like basically one of the only 2 deserts that we have here in Colombia. I would recommend to stay there for a couple of days, maybe 3 days if you are taking it slow. Basically, it's known because it has some beautiful typical desert formations like sand dunes and red stone, and you can either take rental bikes or motorcycles if you want, or you can walk around. And you have also some nice natural water pools where you can relax and have something to eat and stuff like that.
Okay.
That's basically how you would spend the day. But the most famous aspect of the desert would be at night. It has one of the clearest skies, according to people that know about that.
Mm-hmm.
So it has a couple of astronomic observatories there, which every night have certain activities oriented for tourists, and you can have a look around and just watch the night sky and through the telescope is there.
Mm-hmm.
Every month around the full moon, they have special activities and things like that you can enjoy as well.
Now, you mentioned that there were rock formations. To me, this looks like, I would describe it as a Badlands area. So it's a heavily eroded series of hills and mesas. So that kind of heavy erosion that has exposed a lot of the underlying sandstone.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. This area was actually just a few hundred years ago. It was actually a forest
Oh, wow.
right about
Okay.
the area, but it was eroded due to some landslides and stuff like that deviated a river around the area. It's
Okay.
also a really high wind area, so
Mm-hmm.
that contributed a lot. And it's particularly beautiful, in my opinion, because of all the tones that the rocks take.
Mm-hmm.
Either you're in an area where it has a lot of shades of red, but then you walk around a couple of kilometers and it starts to get gray and stuff like that.
Okay. And are we staying there? Are we camping? Are we going on a day trip to there? I don't know how far we went from Neva.
From Neiva, it's just like a couple hours away, so you
Okay.
could make it a day trip.
Okay.
I would recommend staying if you want to camp, and especially, of course, if you want to do anything with the observatories, any
Okay.
of the activities there. So I would recommend staying. You can camp. There are also a couple of luxury hotels that offer the glamping option,
Mhm.
outdoor cabins.
Okay.
If you're looking for a 5-star hotel or something like that, you're not going to find it.
Okay.
But if you're looking to camp, it's a beautiful place to camp, and it's also very popular among locals.
Okay. Excellent. And then cactus there as well. We're talking about a real desert-looking desert here. Anything else we want to talk about in the desert area before you move us along?
Around the month of August,
Mhm.
you have some kite festivals.
Oh, okay. You said it was windy. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that month, it's the windiest of the whole year for the entire region.
Okay.
So they have some big festivals. So it would be a nice time to go there.
Now, are there any particular hikes that you want to recommend that if we're there, this is your favorite?
There are basically only like 3 trails you can follow, but they all take you to the same places and the same locations.
Okay.
So you can see pretty much the same for any trail you take.
Okay. And are there outfitters you would recommend if people are going to come in and want to do the camping but don't want to haul their gear in from wherever they're coming from?
For those looking for a luxury experience, I would recommend the Bethel Bio Hotel,
Okay.
which is what I was telling you about
The
the
glamping.
glamping in
Okay.
like kind of luxury cabins.
Mm-hmm.
And for those looking for a more normal experience or like only camping and stuff, I would recommend the Dunas Tatacoa.
Excellent. And then you moved us along to an archaeological.
Yeah, okay. So this one, it would be like the hardest part of the itinerary because it's kind of far from Neiva. You will
Okay.
have to backtrack to Neiva. And from there, you can either take a whole tour to the archaeological region or you can go on your own. It's basically around 5 or 6 hours by car.
Okay. And where is the archaeological area and what are we going to see there?
Okay, so it's basically around a small town called San Agustin. Like I told you, 5 or 6 hours by car south of Neiva. And basically there, if you can imagine the Eastern Island moss, but like a younger, much smaller version of those, but also more varied in the designs. They are basically tombstones
Oh, okay.
guarding cemeteries. There are basically 3 places where you can see the stones. One is the archaeological park itself, which is called San Agustin Archaeological Park. And the other two are the upper places of mountains, which are called the Idols and the Stones Upper Mountain.
Okay.
Those three are just the best developed ones, but they're still being discovered and all around the region you can find.
Well, and we should say that the archaeological park you're talking about here is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, so it has been designated as a significant place. So we're talking pre-Columbian. By who? What group did this?
Well, it's actually one of the biggest mysteries of the archaeological side of Colombia, because when it was initially discovered, it was thought like they were built around the year 800 to 1000 AD.
Mm-hmm.
But recent carbonite dating have discovered that actually most of those stones were built around the 7th century BC.
Okay.
So it was quite a surprise for the archaeologists working there to find such an ancient culture, especially because when they first got there, the indigenous people that were around the area didn't follow that practice.
They were not stone carvers still.
They didn't even know about them. Like, they discovered them afterwards, the whole colonizing period of the region. I say it's a mystery because they don't know exactly who carved them, or if it was just one culture like a big empire, or if it was several groups that just got together there because it was kind of a strategic area. It has some of the most important rivers of Colombia nearby, so they don't really know if it was a gathering place for many cultures or if it was just like a consolidated empire. And they don't know what was the reason for its disappearance.
Mm-hmm.
It's still early. They haven't made that many studies about it, but it remains a mystery. So it's kind of interesting to see that whole story there in the park. You got the museums and stuff in the small towns, which give you a more accurate perspective of what I'm mentioning here.
Excellent. And was there something else that you wanted to cover in your first week of the itinerary?
For the archaeological park, I would recommend at least 3 or 4 days to stay there so you can actually appreciate. I think the first couple of days would be to go to the actual places and have a look around and walk around all the places, because like I told you, it was very varied in designs. It's not like the moas, which are basically the same. These ones are carved like different designs. Some are animals, like they had their deities were like the eagle, the jaguar, and all the big mammals around there. Mm-hmm. Snakes were also a big part of the culture. And then other ones are basically carved around human traits with like big incisives and stuff like that. So what people think is that it was different tombstones depending on the importance of the person.
Okay.
That was buried there. And they also discovered like pottery and stuff and coins and things like that inside tombstones. The theory is that they buried their shamans and their leaders and stuff like that. So
okay, I got the word leaders. What was the first one that they had buried?
Yeah, so
the
like
shamans.
Like they're religious leaders.
Okay, I figured that's what you were saying, but I didn't know the word.
The theory that it's being currently spread is that each cemetery belonged to a different indigenous group that just got there to bury their most important death, but they didn't necessarily live around the area. That it was just like a gathering point.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And then in that same region, you have a lot of nature and very deep canyons. Mm-hmm. So like I told you before, it's the place where a lot of the most important rivers of the country coincide. And actually nearby, it's what it's called the Magdalena Strait.
Okay.
If you're unfamiliar with Colombian geography, the Magdalena River is basically the most important river of the country. It goes from south to north. Mm-hmm. And a few kilometers away from the archaeological park, it's what it's called the Magdalena Strait. So it's basically a 2-meter wide strait of the river. So it's the narrowest point of the river. So you can like visit and take a bath there and relax. They offer a jeep tour, which I think it's quite nice, and I would recommend, where you go to the strait and then you go around the mountains, just waterfall chasing, basically. Mm-hmm. just having a look around at all the different waterfalls that are there, because it's basically like a few canyons in the area.
Mm-hmm.
So
You were talking about this being a significant point in the geography of Colombia, and mentioned the mountains. So as I'm looking at a relief map, I see two different mountain ranges going from northeast to southwest in Colombia, and one continues on into neighboring countries, and the other one sort of comes to a stop right about here. And you've got this narrow valley that you've taken us in. All of these stops so far are in this valley, and then it opens up into the wider plain right around here. So it would make sense that if they were going to come in, this would be a sort of key trading spot or route, for instance, to get into the interior of Colombia.
exactly. And also nearby there are a lot of rivers that go into the Amazon jungle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it would be a key place in the geography for trade. Exactly.
Excellent. So you've got us now back up to the north, in between, you said, Bogota and Medellin.
Yeah, kind of to the west
Mm-hmm.
of both cities, but not exactly in between, but a little to the west.
Okay.
That's what's called the coffee region, which are three really small departments, but full of activities and one of the biggest, most popular places of the country for the locals.
And I was going to say, you said for locals. So not as many international tourists. We drink the coffee. We don't necessarily go see it where it's grown.
Well, I would say there are, of course, international tourists, but not to the level that there are in Cartagena or Medellin.
Sure. Okay. And where would you take us?
The coffee region of Colombia is composed of three departments. One is Caldas, which is the biggest one, with its capital Manizales.
Okay.
It's the most northern one, closer to Medellin, and bordering the Antioquia department. The other one is called Quindío, with its capital Armenia, which is the closest one to Bogota.
Okay.
And the last one is Risaralda, whose capital is Pereira.
Okay.
Which is the city I would recommend staying.
And that's the one in between the other two.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
That's precisely why I would recommend staying there. And all the attractions are nearby, so you don't have to drive that much from any of those places you choose to stay. I would choose the exact city based on the time of year that you go there, because each city has its own dates for the festivals and carnivals.
Okay.
So depending on where you go, if there's a big celebration in one of those cities, I would go to that city.
Can you tell us which big festivals are noteworthy in the three cities?
Well, the biggest one is the Manizales Carnival, and that one occurs in January, which is for Manizales.
Manizales Festival, which is the festival just after New Year's in the city of Manizales.
And for
I am catching on.
Armenia and Pereira, I would recommend the Harvest Festivals, which are around August, July and August, which have a lot of shows and parades and stuff like that, which are typical of the carnivals in Colombia. All the carnivals have a big parade and shows and, of course, something related to the celebration.
And you say something related to the celebration. That was a little vague. Can you get a little more specific there?
Oh, right. Yeah. So for the Harvest Festival, you basically have like a parade of the people that gather the coffee, and you have like events of tasting and of all related to the harvest. People walking around with the coffee grains in their bags and things like that.
So if you're a really big coffee drinker, going for a harvest festival might be a really good time to go.
Yeah, I think it would be the perfect time to go, because you can also try a lot of the different varieties that are grown around the area.
And I assume there are varieties that never get shipped anyplace else.
The smallest varieties and you know, the hidden jewels of coffee. I think those would be the varieties that you could only find in the area.
Okay. Now, the Manizales Festival is at a different time of year, so we're not going there for the harvest. It's more of a celebrate the start of new life for the new year, or what is that festival like?
Yeah, it's a religious festival or carnival.
Okay, so I would expect to see a procession with the local patron saint or something along those lines? Or
Oh, so basically, yeah, one of the biggest draws of the Manizales Carnival, it's their bullfighting events.
okay.
They have one of the biggest bullfighting arenas of the country, and it's pretty popular. Even though it's gotten some backlash from animal
So this is
organizations.
since it's gotten backlash. This means this is more like the Spanish bullfighting, where the bull usually doesn't walk on its own power out of the arena again.
Oh no, actually, it's considered a good ending when you can kill the bull.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
There's other types of bullfighting, for instance, in southern France, where the people are more at risk than the bulls, because there are no swords involved, for instance. So that's why I ask.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, in this one, it's to the death.
Okay. Anything else we want to do in each of the three capitals?
Once you get to Salento, it's basically the door to the Cocora Valley. And the Cocora Valley is one of the most beautiful nature spots in the country, I would say.
Okay.
Because it's home to the tallest wax palm trees in the world.
Huh.
So basically, you have this valley surrounded by mountains with some, I think it's approximately 50 or 60 meters, the tallest of the trees. For those Americans, that would be around 150 or 160 feet.
Okay.
So yeah, from Salento, you have to take a small jeep, or either if you're taking a tour there, like half an hour away. And then when you get to the Cocora Valley, you either have a long walk around 5 hours if you're up for it, or you can rent horses to take you around the area. And it's just a beautiful place to be. You have also some waterfalls and some natural pools where you can bathe and just appreciate the nature of the valley.
Okay.
So I would say that's like a full day you get to spend there. And in Salento, I would recommend staying there. I would highly recommend you to stay in one of the coffee haciendas,
Okay.
which are all around the area, especially if you're a big coffee lover, because you can take the full tour and learn about the coffee and all the process. You also can take a tasting tour of the different varieties, what we were mentioning earlier.
And if we're looking to stay in a coffee hacienda, are we finding that on the usual hotel search sites? Or how are we finding where to stay?
Yeah, you can find the haciendas in the usual places. I would recommend one which is called Hacienda Combia, basically because of the coffee tour that they take you through. It's got a really well-developed infrastructure around the whole tour. They even have like a small tunnel where you can go like under the earth to actually see like how the coffee is grown from the inside. And you also get to taste any of the 36 aroma varieties that they grow in the area of the hacienda. It's also very comfortable and it has a really beautiful architecture. But any of the haciendas, I think, would offer similar packages.
Okay.
So I would recommend staying for either 1 or 2 days in those haciendas, just relaxing and having your coffee. If you don't have the time for that, or if you're in a family vacation, what I would recommend is to go to the coffee park, which is basically, it's a theme park around the whole process of the coffee, but you also have a lot of kids attractions. And you also have like roller coasters and stuff like that for like teenagers if you're going with some bigger kids. And you have shows and you can see like one of the most beautiful ones is the dance show, which shows you like 20 to 30 typical dances of Colombia.
Okay. And that is in...
It's like a couple hours away from Pereira.
Okay.
In the outskirts, basically. And to end the 2-week itinerary, I would finish in a small town called Santa Rosa de Cabal, which have some beautiful thermal springs nearby. So you can either stay at the thermal springs or there are a few hotels in the area. And you get all the normal things around a thermal spring, spas and massages and stuff like that. So you can relax. The first week or so, I think I've mentioned a lot of walking and a lot of outdoor activities. So I would recommend to end the itinerary in the thermal springs so you can have a couple days of relaxation.
Now, one thing I'm curious about in both places that you took us, both your first week and the second week, we're in the valley, and up on the mountains around us are a number of different national parks.
Yeah, especially in the coffee region, there's a really beautiful natural park, which is Los Nevados Natural Park, which basically translates the snow-capped mountain national park.
Okay.
So you all actually have some snow-capped mountains, of course. You have a couple trails that you can walk around. For the past few years, the trail up to the mountain has been closed because of ongoing activity in the volcano there.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's a volcano there. That's the other thing that you may not have mentioned. Okay.
Yeah. It's actually the snow cap, but it's snow cap volcanoes.
Yep.
And one of them is pretty active, or at least it was a couple of years ago. So it's been closed. Like you cannot climb to the top, but you can still hike around the park.
Okay.
It's not as active as, say, Hawaii or something like that.
Well, yeah. Let's hope not.
It's not like you'd be in any danger or anything, but it is a beautiful place for hiking lovers and nature lovers.
Okay. Well, I'm glad I asked. Well, obviously, if we're going here, one of the things we're drinking is coffee. Are there other things that people should eat or drink when they're in this area?
The whole area, it's known for the beans. It's one of the basic plates, and it's delicious anywhere you eat it. And also in the last place I told you about, it's the Santa Rosa. It's one of the most famous places to eat chorizo in Colombia.
Okay, the spicy sausage.
Exactly. But it's not as spicy as the Spanish variety. This one's a little more soft in the palate. It's also quite famous.
Got it.
And for the first region also I told you about, the whole area around Neiva, I would recommend the tamales.
Okay.
You've heard of the Mexican tamales?
I have had Mexican tamales, yes.
Exactly. Here it's a little bit different. It's also like corn flour, but it has a different way of making. And it's on banana leaves, basically with rice and chicken and beef. So the area around Neiva, it's pretty known for the tamales. And for the achiras, which is basically a plant of the variety of the banana and ginger.
Okay.
But it's mostly used for flour, and they make these delicious little snacks, which are called the same name, achiras.
Okay. What is going to surprise me about this region of Colombia?
The nature part of it, because it's pretty untouched and green. It's in a high state of conservation, I would say. Even though it's got the whole tourist aspect of it, they also have a lot of tendency towards conservation, I would say.
Well, and because we're talking about Colombia, and people in the U.S. may not have heard of Colombia in the last 20 years, and so they may still be remembering way back with Pablo Escobar and those sort of things. Are there any places you would not recommend we go in Colombia right now?
Yeah, right now there are a couple of places, especially around the Pacific coast of Colombia. Cali is one of the most dangerous cities of the country, and the entire Pacific coast is one of the biggest areas for cocaine dealing.
Got it.
And shipping. So I wouldn't, for any reason whatsoever, go to the Pacific coast right now, especially after the FARC agreement, the peace agreement. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
A little bit, yeah.
After the peace agreement was signed, one of the topics of the agreement was the cleaning of the coca.
All the planted coca
exactly.
plantations. Yep.
Yeah, so it was supposed to start the cleaning process, but there are a lot of people that their lives depend on those kind of fields. So
on the coca fields.
Yeah, exactly. Especially in that region, which is pretty poor and away from all the government. There have been a lot of problems trying to get people to understand why they have to remove their ways of living.
Got it.
The whole Caribbean coast is fine. Medellin, Bogota, the big
Got
cities.
it. Okay.
But I would not recommend to go to the Pacific coast,
Okay.
especially particularly around the area with near the border with Ecuador. That's the place I would avoid. But other than that, if you stay to the main tourist places, it's fine. Petty theft is king in the cities,
Keep
but
an eye on
nothing
your
major.
valuables. Use them on a
Yeah.
belt. Yeah. Okay.
Exactly.
One thing that makes you laugh and say only in Colombia.
Well, this is actually, I don't know if you've seen the movie Bruce Almighty with Jim Carrey.
Yes, I have.
Yeah, exactly. So it's about this guy that gets all of God's power, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this scene where he's like replying to all the prayers around the world. And he basically says like, oh, I wish I could have some good coffee right now. And there's this Colombian guy that comes with a donkey and
Right.
offers him like one of the typical Colombian cup of coffees. It makes me laugh that I would say in the coffee region, it's the only place in the world where that actually could happen. You're just in your room, in your hotel room, or especially in one of the haciendas, and you're just like, oh, I would like some coffee right now. And one of the workers of the hacienda is just going by and, oh, here you go. You have some nice Colombian coffee. So that always makes me laugh about it.
Okay. You're standing in the prettiest spot in either of the regions that you were talking about. Where are you standing? What are you looking at?
It's definitely the Cocora Valley.
Okay.
I'm standing on top of one of the mountains and just overlooking the whole wax palm trees.
Okay.
And around sunset or something like that, I would say that's definitely the prettiest spot.
Okay. And I had to look up wax palm tree because that is not something I'm that familiar with, but I could see that would be quite beautiful.
Yeah.
Excellent. Any tips that you have of something that you should either bring or not bring to Colombia when you come?
I wouldn't say you shouldn't bring anything, but you have to be pretty careful if you're carrying around like one of those huge cameras
Sure.
or like really, really expensive electronic equipment, especially in the big cities. I would be very, very careful with that, but I wouldn't say you shouldn't bring it.
Excellent. And last question. If you had to summarize this region of Colombia in just 3 words, what 3 words would you use?
Authentic,
Okay.
historic, and cozy.
And cozy. Excellent. Our guest again has been Alejandro from Bogota. And Alejandro, thank you for coming on Amateur Traveler and sharing with us your love for your own country of Colombia and especially this region here in the south.
Oh no, thank you for having me, Chris. I had a great time.
In news of the community, I had a couple iTunes reviews recently, or Apple Podcast reviews, not sure what to call them anymore. Well, one was from Savio from Canada, who said, travel is a privilege, and I've been fortunate enough to take 2 or 3 trips a year. I enjoy planning my trip, and the Amateur Traveler podcast is a great resource. What I appreciate the most is that the host, Chris, and his guests are chatting about what makes a place interesting. Also, hidden gems I should see and overhyped sites I should avoid. Even if you have no plan to go to Uzbekistan or Laos or Namibia or places you've never heard of, it is enjoyable to learn about them in your armchair. Well, thanks so much, Savio. It's interesting you mentioned Namibia because...
I don't know that one.
And the Amazon Echo wants to join the conversation. It's interesting that you mentioned Namibia because after we did the most recent episode on Namibia, we heard back from a couple people who had never thought about going to Namibia. One couple honeymooned there after listening to that episode, and somebody else, as I recall, traveled there as well. So I haven't made it there yet, but I know that I wanted to go after listening to that episode also. But I am going to Southern Africa next year, as we mentioned at the beginning. If you're interested in joining me, this is a trip that starts in Joburg and goes to Kruger National Park and then up into Botswana on safari and then ends at Victoria Falls. Not a long trip, but it's easy to combine this with a trip to Cape Town or something else like that if you're interested in doing that. Go to amateurtraveler.com/Africa2019 for more details. And with that, we're going to end this episode of Amateur Traveler. If you have any questions, send an email to host@amateurtraveler.com or leave a review on iTunes or Apple Podcasts like Savio did. And thanks so much for listening.
one more cathedral